Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary under President Donald Trump, suggested the introduction of universal tariffs on U.S. imports, beginning at 2.5% and escalating by the same rate each month, potentially reaching as high as 20%. This approach is intended to give businesses and nations adequate time to adapt and negotiate improved trade agreements. Nevertheless, President Trump has expressed a desire for more considerable tariffs. He revealed his intention to levy tariffs on imported computer chips, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals shortly, criticizing existing subsidies and proposing that higher tariffs would deter imports and enhance domestic manufacturing. These suggested tariffs are anticipated to be much steeper than the initial 2.5%. Since taking office on January 20th, 2025, President Donald Trump has swiftly implemented a variety of tariffs targeting key U.S. trading allies, particularly Canada, Mexico, and China. These measures are part of his administration's extensive strategy to address issues such as illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and trade imbalances. Thus far, the Trump administration has imposed tariffs on multiple countries, primarily their allies. On his inauguration day, President Trump declared a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico. In his latest speech on January 30th, Trump announced that a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico would take effect on Saturday. He is also considering whether to include oil imports from these countries in the tariffs, stating that he will assess if the prices charged are fair. This move aims to address issues related to illegal immigration and the smuggling of fentanyl-related chemicals. Canada has vehemently opposed these tariffs. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has indicated that Canada will implement retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods if the U.S. proceeds with its tariffs. These countermeasures aim to ensure no single Canadian region bears a disproportionate burden. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has proposed halting electricity exports to U.S. states such as Michigan, New York, and Minnesota as a form of retaliation. This move aims to leverage Canada's significant role in supplying power to these regions. A survey by KPMG reveals that 81% of Canadian business leaders are prepared to endure short-term challenges from retaliatory tariffs to secure a fair trade agreement that safeguards Canada's economic interests and sovereignty. Trump recently stated that the US does not need Canada, saying, "We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody." In a press conference 2 weeks ago, he said, "Canada is subsidized to the tune of about $200 billion a year plus other things. They don't essentially have a military. They have a very small military. They rely on our military. It's all fine." He further suggested that Canada could become the 51st US state to eliminate trade deficits and avoid tariffs. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has indicated that all options are being considered in response to the US tariffs, stating that nothing is off the table. This suggests that energy export measures could be part of Canada's strategy, although internal divisions exist regarding this approach. Beyond counter-tariffs, Canada has intensified efforts by collaborating with international partners, including the European Union, Denmark, Mexico, and others, to develop a unified response. Canadian Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly announced plans to work with her counterparts in allied nations like Britain, Mexico, and several EU member states to create a coordinated strategy against the potential US tariffs. Speaking to reporters in Ottawa, she stated that she has been in touch with her Mexican counterpart and plans to reach out this week to British officials and representatives from the 27-member European Union. "The central focus of my discussions with the British and Europeans will be on how to respond to the tariffs," she said. "Our strategy is to ensure a coordinated approach. We know that in various European capitals, as well as in the UK, discussions are already underway regarding potential retaliation and different responses to these tariffs," Joly remarked. She also emphasized the need to strengthen trade between Canada and the EU, who signed a free trade agreement in 2016 to reduce dependence on the US market. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum similarly criticized the tariffs, arguing that they would not effectively address immigration and drug trafficking issues. She stressed the importance of cooperative efforts between the US and Mexico to tackle these complex problems, and cautioned that the tariffs could damage diplomatic relations. In addition to targeting North American neighbors, President Trump has proposed an extra 10% tariff on all imports from China, citing China's role in producing and distributing fentanyl, a potent synthetic opioid exacerbating the US drug crisis. This tariff is also planned to commence on February 1st, 2025. China's government has responded by emphasizing the mutual benefits of US-China trade relations and expressing a willingness for constructive talks to resolve trade disputes. Tariffs on the EU. Expanding his trade policy further, President Trump has cautioned the European Union that it might face tariffs if it does not increase its purchases of American oil and gas. He asserted that the EU needs to significantly reduce its trade deficit with the US by boosting energy purchases. Otherwise, tariffs on European imports will be enforced. Trump's position extends beyond tariffs. He has also shown interest in purchasing Greenland and has not dismissed the possibility of using military force to achieve this. In reaction to US President Donald Trump's renewed interest in acquiring Greenland, Denmark has undertaken several actions to reinforce its sovereignty over the territory and strengthen alliances within Europe. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has been actively engaging with European leaders to gather support against US pressures. She highlighted the necessity of European unity when facing external threats, stating, "We must stand together in Europe." Frederiksen held discussions with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron, focusing on enhancing European cooperation and security. Chancellor Scholz emphasized that borders should not be altered by force, implicitly addressing the US stance on Greenland. To enhance its defense capabilities in the Arctic region, Denmark has announced a substantial investment of approximately $2.1 billion. This funding is designated for building 3 new Arctic naval vessels, acquiring surveillance drones, and improving satellite monitoring systems. These initiatives aim to bolster Denmark's military presence in Greenland and affirm its commitment to the territory's security. Denmark is working to unite European allies to secure its control over Greenland. Prime Minister Frederiksen is holding talks with key European leaders, aiming to consolidate Europe's stance against Trump's threats at an upcoming Brussels Security Summit. Discussions include the potential deployment of European troops in Greenland, although Denmark has not formally requested this yet. In response to these threats, Denmark has announced new military investments to strengthen its defense in Greenland, a region gaining strategic importance due to climate change-induced navigability and resource availability. Greenland's Prime Minister MB Agidi has reiterated that while the island is open to increased cooperation with the United States, its residents do not wish to become Americans. He emphasized Greenland's desire for self-determination and independence, stating that the territory belongs to its own people. As a major trading partner, the EU is already facing escalating tensions with the US following multiple energy crises, triggered by Ukraine halting Russian energy transit, Qatar stopping gas exports to Europe, and a ban ceasing supplies due to unexplained technical issues. The EU is dealing with an increasingly unstable energy situation. These issues were worsened by a new wave of US sanctions on Russian oil and gas, leading to a spike in global energy prices. The EU has been most affected by these consequences, with gas prices soaring. Public dissatisfaction with the European Commission is rising, and inflation continues to burden economies across the continent. Adding to the pressure, Trump has announced intentions to impose additional tariffs on European products, further endangering the already delicate EU-US relationship. These measures are expected to have long-term effects on the EU economy, exacerbating existing problems and threatening the region's economic stability. In response, the EU is taking robust steps to lessen potential impacts, recognizing the need to decrease its dependence on US trade and demonstrate economic resilience. The bloc has accelerated efforts to diversify its global trade partnerships. A key part of this strategy is the recently signed free trade agreement with Mexico, a US neighbor. This agreement not only strengthens the EU's position in North America, but also signals its ability to form significant alliances outside of US influence. Additionally, the EU has secured a landmark free trade deal with South American countries, reinforcing its commitment to expanding its global trade network ahead of Trump's potential tariffs. Through these initiatives, the EU aims to protect itself from possible US economic pressures while asserting its role as a major player in global trade. These partnerships offer more than just economic benefits. They also serve as geopolitical statements of the EU's intent to navigate and counter the challenges posed by a second Trump presidency. In this video, we examine the EU's retaliatory measures and their possible effects on the US-European Union relationship. The European Union, EU, and Mexico have completed a modernized trade agreement significantly enhancing their economic partnership. This updated agreement, finalized on January 17, 2025, aims to lessen both parties' economic dependence on the United States, especially in anticipation of potential US tariff hikes under President Donald Trump. Key aspects of the EU-Mexico trade agreement. The agreement eliminates high tariffs on various EU exports to Mexico, including agricultural products such as cheese, poultry, pork, pasta, apples, jams, chocolate, and wine. This is expected to greatly increase EU agri-food exports. EU businesses will obtain better access to Mexican government contracts, investments, and service sectors, including financial services and telecommunications. This ensures EU firms receive equal treatment with Mexico's other preferred trade partners, like the US and South Korea. The agreement includes enforceable commitments on labor rights and environmental protections, highlighting both parties' dedication to sustainable development. The deal aims to improve the supply chain of essential raw materials, ensuring a sustainable and secure supply vital for various industries. This modernized agreement updates the original EU-Mexico Global Agreement in effect since 2000. The new accord is designed to reflect the changing economic landscape and deepen the strategic partnership between the EU and Mexico. The agreement now requires ratification by both EU and Mexican legislators before implementation. This process is expected to undergo scrutiny from various stakeholders, including European farmers concerned about increased competition. The European Union and the Mercosur bloc, comprising Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, have finalized an extensive trade agreement after 25 years of negotiations. This agreement aims to create one of the world's largest free trade zones, covering over 700 million people and nearly 25% of global GDP. Key elements of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement: tariff reductions. The agreement plans to remove tariffs on over 90% of goods traded between the EU and Mercosur countries, potentially saving EU companies around 4 billion EUR annually in export duties. Market access. EU industries, including automobiles and chemicals, will gain improved access to Mercosur markets, while South American agricultural products like beef and poultry will receive increased entry into the EU, subject to specific quotas, sustainability commitments. Both parties have agreed to uphold the Paris Climate Agreement and implement measures to prevent deforestation by 2030. The deal includes dispute resolution mechanisms to enforce these commitments. Challenges and opposition. Despite potential economic benefits, the agreement faces resistance within the EU, especially from farmers and environmental groups. Critics argue that the influx of South American agricultural products could undermine European farmers and raise environmental standard concerns. French President Emmanuel Macron has expressed strong reservations, seeking additional safeguards and sustainable commitments. Ratification process. For the agreement to take effect, it must be ratified by all 27 EU member states and approved by the European Parliament. Given the existing opposition, particularly from countries with significant agricultural sectors, the ratification process may encounter obstacles and could take several years. Early engagements and formalization. After World War II, the United States' involvement with Europe laid the foundation for its relationship with what would later become the European Union. The Marshall Plan, launched in 1948, was crucial in rebuilding Europe, providing financial aid to war-torn nations. To stabilize their economies and encourage regional cooperation, the US also supported the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, in 1951, viewing it as a way to prevent future conflicts between France and Germany by integrating key industries. In 1954, the EU's predecessor established its delegation in Washington, D.C. to manage growing economic ties. This relationship deepened with the creation of the United States mission to the European communities in Brussels in 1961, symbolizing a mutual commitment to fostering political and economic cooperation. Formation of security alliances. Immediately after World War II, the United States emerged as a global leader, actively shaping the post-war international order. Recognizing the escalating threat from the Soviet Union, the US took decisive actions to contain Soviet expansion and promote democratic values. The establishment of NATO in 1949 was in response to the Soviet Union's actions.